Hello, I'm Brett Gilliland, host of the Circuit of Success podcast, and here's what's coming up.
The grind is the grind. I mean, it's part of the job. It's like we have a great job, and it's a different job. We're into entertainment, right? Our job is to be a conduit between the team and the fans and try to explain what's going on so that they have a better and fuller understanding and appreciation.
Welcome to the Circuit of Success. I'm your host, Brett Gilliland, and today I've got Chip Caray with me. Chip, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Brett. How are you?
I'm good, man. It's good to be with you. You are the new voice of the St. Louis Cardinals. We're about a month and a half in now, right?
Well, the newness hasn't worn off. I'm still the new guy. So
That's right.
It's been a wonderful experience and really a dream come true growing up here and never imagining this opportunity would take place. It's been quite a whirlwind last 4 or 5 months, but hey, that's the life we've chosen, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So off we go.
That's right. Well, I'm sure you're glad that we're talking now 8 days later than say 7 days ago. 'Cause what are we, 7 of the last 8? Some victories here for the Cardinals?
Yeah, it's a lot more fun when you win. It's been a topsy-turvy season, but that's the nature of the game. We say it all the time. You play 162 for a reason.
That's right.
And in today's world, everybody gets caught up in the instantaneous results of one off game doesn't determine how a guy's going to play or a pitcher's going to pitch or a team's going to perform over the course of 162. But, that was a very good week last week and a good start to the series against the Brewers.
Right.
Hopefully we can put 20 on them tonight.
I think what was it, 20 last night?
It was
18. Okay, that's what I thought. If you
just increase by 10% every game, you feel really good about your chances.
I like it. I like our odds.
Yeah,
I like our odds. That's good. Well, if you can, I always start all my podcast, Chip, with kind of what's made you the man you are today, and obviously people know your story and know who you are, but I think it's important to hear it from the horse's mouth, right? And so, if you could, kind of share a little bit of the background story. What's made you the man you are today?
I guess experience. The old saying, it takes a village, is really true. I wouldn't be in professional broadcasting were it not for my dad and my grandfather. I didn't know Harry very well. Didn't really spend a lot of time with my dad until I was almost in college. My parents were divorced. I remember him leaving when I was a 5-year-old. And, he pulled out of the driveway. And I said to my mom, "Where's Dad going?" Because it was the off season for him. And she said, "He's going on a long road trip." That's how she kind of explained their split. My wife, obviously, we have 4 children, and she's had to be mother and father for 6-7 months a year for the 27 years we've been married, allowing me to fulfill my dream and go out and talk about baseball and provide for our family, obviously. She's certainly a rock. My kids are certainly an inspiration for me. It's the best thing I ever did is having 4 children. I have a 25-year-old daughter, identical twin 23-year-old sons who are broadcasters in Amarillo, Texas for the Sod Poodles, and a 14-year-old as well. So at 58, I've been blessed. But as far as experience goes, I learned a lot from my dad and father and what not to be, as much as what to be. And I think that's a really important lesson for anybody. Harry didn't really value family, didn't understand that until much later in his life. My dad didn't take care of himself as well as he would have, and in the latter stages of his life, that came back to haunt him. But the lessons of life that they taught me: tell the truth, be yourself, be honest, and show up at work every day, talking about a game and a sport you love. That's going to carry you a long way. And if you'll pardon the pun, that's exactly what's happened.
Well, you've had a hell of a career, man. Just to name a few, I didn't know this until I was doing my research, but you were with the Mariners. But even before that, you were with the Orlando Magic from 89 to 98.
Yeah,
I'm trying to think, was that Shaquille O'Neal time?
Yeah, well, that was even before that. 89 was their expansion year. I was 24 years old. And to my point earlier about it takes a village, a man named Bob Neal knew my dad and knew of me and saw Pat Williams, who was the general manager and the man responsible for getting the expansion team in Orlando.
Yeah.
And he talked to Pat at the All-Star game from Houston, Texas that year. And Pat said to Bob Neal, "Hey, we're looking for an announcer." And Bob said, "Well, I think Chip Caray would be a perfect choice for you." And Pat said, "Skip Caray would want to come do our games?" And Bob said, No, not Skip. It's Chip, Chip's son. And Pat, who had worked with my grandfather and knew my dad, said, quote, "Oh, God, there's another one." So at the age of 24, I was hired as an expansion announcer for the Orlando Magic. The team won 15 games. I was worse than the team. I had no idea what I was getting into. I kind of did the Bob Costas route when he took the Spirits of St. Louis job. He told Rudy Marsky, "Oh yeah, I've done a lot of college basketball, a lot of pro basketball, I have all kinds of experience." I didn't know sports basketball, but I had great partners and a great support staff. And there's nothing better as a young announcer than starting with a team from the ground up, because you grow together. And to your point, yeah, they drafted Shaq, they drafted Penny Hardaway, got really, really good. Didn't win an NBA title, but I had 7 great years in Orlando. Met my wife there, and lived there for 20 plus years until we moved to St. Augustine, Florida, where we live now. And a lot of fond memories of Orlando, where it all started for us.
St. Augustine, I think, is that the oldest town in the country?
Oldest city in America. Don't let the Pilgrims fool you. Our city was founded in 1565. That was 40 years before Plymouth Rock and the Pilgrims and Jamestown and all of that stuff. And it truly is a magical place. My wife went to Flagler College there.
Okay.
Brief history lesson. Henry Flagler was John Rockefeller's business partner. He was the railroad guy, and he built a railroad from Jacksonville, Florida, all the way to Key West, Florida. Built it himself, and I think he spent $200 million in 1800s money, and it was all his. That's how wealthy he was in the Gilded Age of America. It's truly a fabulous, fabulous place.
That's crazy. Have you watched How I Built This? Have you ever seen that on isn't that amazing?
Yeah, there's a great book called Last Train to Paradise that talks about how the railroad was built. Henry Flagler founded the city of Miami. He built the breakers in Palm Beach by himself. He built the railroad all the way down to Key West. The Hotel Casa Marina was his residence down there. And just the trials and tribulations, what people went through in surviving the hurricanes and all of that. It's truly a wonderful read, but it's a beautiful part of paradise. And that's probably where they'll plant me in 6 feet under, hopefully in 3 or 4 years.
That's right.
Really, really fortunate and blessed to live there, for sure.
Well, I originally met you down with Brad Thompson down in Florida there in the booth at spring training, and it's funny. I stayed at a different hotel, but I went to the Breakers, and I actually got online there. I'm like, I'll stay at the Breakers. It's a nice little place. I'm close, and didn't realize it was going to be about $4,000 a night for a normal hotel room. So hopefully that guy is still getting some residual income off that.
It's only money. You can't take it with you. They don't build a box big enough. But yeah,
that's right.
It's a remarkable place, and it's a remarkable part of the world. And as great as that is, coming back to St. Louis and rekindling all the friendships and familial relationships, and revisiting all the places that I haunted as a kid and teenager and high school student, has really been one of the most rewarding parts of this job. And to be welcomed back so warmly by so many, mostly because of the works of my dad and grandfather, is really, really a special thing. It's not lost on. Life's good. It's really good.
Yeah, it's great. So tell us a little bit, if you can. I mean, how did this go down? Do you get a phone call from somebody and they say, "Hey, man, we want you to"? Yeah.
Yeah, I was under contract in Atlanta, and my standard line with that has been I fully intended to retire as a member of the Valley family in Atlanta. I'd been there 20 years and made it very clear that I wanted to stay there. It just got harder and harder to keep trying to stay there. That said, when Dan McLaughlin's situation arose, and that's certainly a tragic thing, they called and asked if I would have an interest. Mike Claiborne called me and said, "Hey, I'm just calling because I'm doing some reconnaissance here." And I said, "Of course, I'll talk to anybody." My standard line has truly been, I don't talk about someone else's job until they don't have it anymore, and no one could have planned what happening. And so, as great as this chance has been for me, I want to be clear, I'm very sad about that on a lot of different levels with Dan. He's a friend, and praying for his return and recovery. But that said, they called me a week or so before Christmas and said, "Hey, we'd like to talk to you." Obviously, Christmas and New Year's took place. I flew up to St. Louis, I think the second week of January, came in here on a Friday morning, interviewed with the Cardinals, interviewed with the Valley people. They said they'd get back to me soon. I think there was another candidate or two that they wanted to talk to. And Monday morning at 10 o'clock in St. Augustine, while I was on my morning walk, I got a call from Larry Mago at Valley Midwest, who said, "Hey, what's it going to take for us to bring you to St. Louis?" And I said, "Well, do you need more interviews?" He said, No, you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. Do you want the job?" I said, "Yeah, I think I do." So that's kind of how it took place. A week before Christmas, and then 3 weeks later, they offered me the position, and here we are.
Yeah. So talk about opening day this year. I was down there. It was incredible. Obviously, we don't need to worry about the end result of the game, but just the day, the pomp and circumstances with that. Talk to us about that. I mean, being with the Mariners, being with the Cubs, the Braves. I mean, do you witness anything like that anywhere else?
No, it's different here, obviously. growing up in St. Louis. I was born and raised here, 1965, went to Parkway West High School, was born at St. Mary's Hospital right over by the old Checker Dome and the old arena. I'd never been to an opening day, even as a fan. And I don't believe that in my years doing the Cubs, we ever played opening day against the Cardinals. If we did, it's because the synapses aren't firing, but I don't remember it. My wife flew in and was asking me what to expect. And all I said to her is, it's going to be unlike anything you've ever seen. You're going to see the Hall of Famers. You're going to see the current players come out. You're going to see the Clydesdales. And I'm telling you, honey, when you see the Clydesdales, they're going to give a standing ovation to the horses. And she said, come on. And I said, just watch. So she was up there filming, and she's putting all that stuff out on Facebook. Even she was completely and totally blown away. And look, when you're from here, the Cardinals are a civic trust. They're a civic institution. And the remarkable job the DeWitt family has done in preserving that here is something that can't go unnoticed. The people that work for the Cardinals understand the role they play in this community. We all who sit in our chairs understand how important the job is. We have a love affair with the team. And for me, it was a transition that wasn't easy, but it was made easier because growing up here, I understood that. I understood how important the Cardinals are to civic pride and what they mean to the city and how intensely the fans follow and how much they love their favorite players. And seeing those old guys come around in the convertibles, my guy was Ted Simmons. I couldn't help but get a little emotional about watching him switch hit with the long flowing hair. I wore 23 in Little League because Ted Simmons was my guy.
Wow.
And in the Cardinals Hall of Fame and seeing him there on opening day was obviously one of the highlights for me, and I know for the fans as well.
Yeah, it really is incredible to watch all those guys that come out and they come back. The red jackets, they're amazing. So, talk about the grind for you. You know, obviously people see you now and you've had all these years, but you weren't just this guy who was on TV and calling baseball games. There's a certain part of that, right? You go to high school, you go to college, and then you get on the grind. What was that like? And just to let everybody know too, you have a fourth generation starting the grind right now, right? So you have Harry, you got your dad, you got you, and now your twin boys are the scary sod poodles, right?
That's right, the sod poodles down in Amarillo, Texas. They're in Frisco, Texas today. The grind is the grind, and it's part of the job. It's like we have a great job, and it's a different job. We're into entertainment, right? Our job is to be a conduit between the team and the fans and try to explain what's going on so that they have a better and fuller understanding and appreciation for what takes place on the field. It is a grind. It's the hardest grind in sports. It's 162 games in about 185 days. We're in a stretch now of 17 straight games without a day off. That doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're out there trying to perform and do that every day, when you factor in the travel and the time zone changes and all of the media attention that this club gets, that's a big part of it. But I'm one of those old school kind of guys that, it's what we chose to do. I'm a 162 guy. You start your season April 1st. You say goodbye to your family. You give your wife a hug and a kiss, and you say, "Hey, I love you, but my mistress is calling. I've got to go do baseball months, and then I'll come back." I just think that's part of the ebb and flow of how we do it. In fact, my wife and I joke, we haven't been married 27 years. We've been married 27 seasons. And I think that's kind of a look into the, behind the curtain as to how a lot of us think. Our life is truly one that follows the ebbs and flows of the season. There's baseball season, then there's off season, and being able to meld those things and try to make the best of the circumstances, being, shall we say, imprisoned by the schedule is a real challenge, but you can't do it without a great partner. I've got the best one in the world, and I'm grateful that she's allowed me to do that.
Yeah. So a lot of business leaders listen to this podcast, and I think that support system, touch on that a little bit more. How crucial is that? Whether you're doing what you do 162 games a year or what I do as a business leader, like how important is that stuff?
Hugely important. I'll speak personally. My wife said to me right before the season started, when she saw how relieved I was, for lack of a better way of putting it, to see how excited I was again, re-energized I was again. She said, I'm really excited about our career for the first time in 20 years. That means a lot, because there's a great deal of guilt that I have, and I'm sure a lot of my colleagues have it too. Again, I have 4 children. I'm off covering a baseball team and staying at the Ritz-Carlton with the club, and my children are home with the flu, and she's up all night with a sick kid, and I can't do about it, or the car breaks down, or you've got a roof leak, all those things that normal careers allow you to deal with. We can't, because I have to be where I want to go. My daughter was born in 1997 in November, and my grandfather passed away. I went to Chicago to work with the Cubs. And I remember at the front door, they sent a car for me to take me to the airport to go start my job. And I'm bawling. And my wife said, "Don't worry, I'll bring her to you." There's a great deal of guilt that I have because my kids are, again, in their 20s and 14, and I've missed half of their life because we don't live where I work, and that's a family decision for myriad reasons. But I haven't seen any of my kids take their first step. I haven't seen my kids say their first words in many cases because I'm gone. And it's not that I want to be; it's that I have to be to provide for my family the way that I can. So, yes, having that support system at home is hugely important. There were ups and downs. There were a lot of challenges. Certainly, they have to understand that. Again, as I said, I don't want to go, but I have to.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a supporting partner who understands that to do the job right, they have to take second place sometimes. It makes it a real challenge. And fortunately for me, over the last decade or so, that hasn't been the case.
Yeah. Well, hats off to her. Tip of the cap to your wife, because that takes a special person. But let's talk about the, again, business side. You got goal planning. You got just different goals you want to have. Like what's that like for you as an announcer? Because you can't go out and hit the baseball. You can't go out and pitch the baseball. But what goals do you have, if there is such a thing? What does that planning look like for you? And then what does a year look like for you? Like, what's a goal for Chip Caray for 2023?
Well, I'll start with the microeconomics part of it. Is number one, I think our job is to inform and entertain. We are on TV for 2.5 or 3 hours a day, and our job is to make sure that fans, as I said, understand what the heck's going on with the ball club as honestly and as fairly as we possibly can. As you said, there was a stretch of 8 games where the Cardinals looked terrible. There's no sugarcoating that. And luckily in this town, fans don't want to be, shall we say, have the wool pulled over their eyes. If they're playing bad, say so. In a lot of markets and places where I've worked, that's not always the case. When they play well like they are now, I think that honesty allows us to be even more excited and more overjoyed because we've been honest about when things weren't going well. So inform and entertain, first of all. Secondly, be prepared. You have to prepare yourself physically and mentally that, hey, it's a grind and get through this week, get through the road trip, get through the first month, the second month, because it truly is a long season. As I said, 183 days and 162 games, and that doesn't count spring training or the postseason. We all, fingers crossed, hope the Cardinals make. You just have to prepare yourself that you're going to be gone for a while. I don't live in St. Louis year round. My family's back in Florida, so I have to move all my stuff up. And then when the season's over, move all my stuff back. And then when I come back home, I have to do the laundry the way my wife was doing it, not the way that I did, because I come in and eventually screw everything up.
Yeah.
It's just a constant adjustment. It's just a constant, shall we say, battle of, being there and being present as much as you can. Thankfully, we have technology that allows us to do that. But understanding that, the job is what the job is, and this is unfortunately part of it. You can't be there full time.
Well, and for you, it's tough, I would assume. I've talked to other guys about this. You got to be on, right? Even if you got the sniffles or you're not feeling well or whatever. Yeah. People don't care, right? They got to hear you and they want to hear your enthusiasm.
Well, it's like a player in a major league game. If they've got a hamstring pull and they're in the lineup, if they're good enough to play or good enough to be in the lineup, they're good enough to play, right? And a lot of that stuff is kept from us for strategic reasons, which I understand. But yeah, I've done games with strep throat. I've done games with pneumonia. I've done games with a horrible cough. I've done games where, I think I had food poisoning a couple of times. But yeah, that's the job. And if we don't work, we don't get paid. So there's obviously a financial incentive to power your way through those things. But that's just the nature of the job. You find a way to power through. You find a way to get it done. And if at the end of the day it's 3 hours that you're not 100%, just give whatever your 100% is that day, and I think people respect that.
Let's talk about the pitch clock. How big of a game changer was this?
Huge. I think it's the biggest thing that we've seen in the game since they lowered the mound after 1968. Baseball's basically just trimmed a lot of the fat out of the game, the scratching and spitting and walk-up music and all the silliness that all of us who love the game allowed to invade the sport. It's gone. We had a 2-hour and 30-minute game last night. Selfishly, I get paid the same if it's an hour game or a 5-hour game, so I'm all for the 2.5-hour affairs.
But on a 19-run game, right? I mean, think about that.
Yeah, that's the other part of it. I mean, we're still seeing good baseball. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of strikeouts still, but by and large, the game itself hasn't changed. We've just gotten rid of a lot of the garbage that caused people to look at their cell phones instead of looking at the field. And I think if you notice the center field camera, people are watching their phones. They're paying attention to the game. And I think that's resonated very well with the fans. So I applaud baseball for trying this. And I applaud the players, too, for, by and large, not having any problems with it.
So for those Cardinal fans that are listening, they're like, yeah, they're kind of, Cardinal fans get mad pretty quickly, but they also rebound pretty quickly, in my opinion, living here for 22 years. Talk to us, though, about the importance of the World Baseball Classic, the pitch clock, a new catcher, all those things. How did that play into that first, month of baseball that really wasn't good Cardinal baseball? Do you think there's a thing there?
Maybe. I think there's a lot of newness here, new coaching staff, a lot of new coaches, new catcher. Obviously, that's a hugely important position for 20 years. Fans in St. Louis, the pitching staff especially, never had to shake off Yadier Molina. Right,
right.
Okay, he's supposed to throw a fastball. I'm throwing a fastball, so there's a learning curve there. Miles Michaelis and Genesis Cabrera and Gallegos and Wainwright weren't here. They were off with their WBC teams. That slowed the learning curve, as it were. But I think, and I say this respectfully, Cardinal fans have been spoiled in a great way. I think there's a whole generation of 16-year-olds that have never seen this team have a losing year. So this was a shock to the system, the way that they played. It certainly shocked me. It shocked the players as well. But I love what Ollie Marmol said, look, we put ourselves in this hole. It's our job to dig ourselves out of it. And I think the Cardinals feel confident that they can do that. They're 6.5 games, or 6.5 games out of first place, despite being 8 or 9 games under 500. Don't look at the record. Look at where you are in the standings. And I think this club is certainly capable of rattling off a run like we're on now more than once and getting back to the top of the division, where I think if you look at the talent level, the Cardinals do have the best team. Now it's up to them to show it.
Yeah. It's funny. It must have put something on TikTok about that 16 or 17. My 17-year-old said, Dad, did you know this is the worst St. Louis Cardinal team in my lifetime so far?
Yeah.
It's crazy. We've been very lucky. Yes, exactly.
There were some lean years in Chicago, but that's part of it. It truly is character building. And Mike Claiborne has said he doesn't start to worry about or think about what the team is or isn't until Flag Day. That's the second week in June, I think. That's a little late for me. But usually it's the 54-game mark, a third of the way through the season. You really, really have your fingers on the pulse of what your team is and isn't. And that's when the discussions start, not just with your club, but the other clubs, about mixing and matching and making moves to improve your fortunes. And I'm confident the Cardinals are going to do that.
Talk to us about a typical. No, go ahead.
I got to put some power on my iPad. Hang on a second.
All right. Sounds good. All right.
I feel like Kip from Napoleon Dynamite technology. Okay, plug that bad boy in. Sorry about that.
Oh, you're good. Not a problem at all.
Okay, we got power again. Sorry.
All right. So next question. What was my next question? Was typical day. What's a typical day like for people like you and your job?
Yeah, at home I get up. Obviously, I get up early, get coffee, check out all the newspapers, all the websites, read the opposing team's newspaper, read our newspapers, get the clips, read through those. Try to watch the MLB Network, look at the highlights if there's anything spectacular that comes on. We have a great statistician named Dan Hyatt who sends us some really cool and obscure stuff that's much more interesting to me than just, hey, he's got 2 home runs or a 5-game hitting streak, and how to incorporate that stuff. Really what it is, as you said earlier, it's kind of like cramming for a test. You have all this study material. We get a ream of notes about that thick every single day. I mean, it's hundreds of pages of statistical information that you can't get through it all. And I think our job is to win through that and pick out the nugget or two that we will probably talk about. The great thing about our job is that nobody at home will know what we wanted to get to and didn't, because you've got 3 games or 4 games to try to get that stuff in. But then you go do the game, and ultimately the game is going to dictate what you talk about. We do our open. We have a production meeting in the booth about 3:30 or 4 o'clock after we talk to the manager, and try to formulate some ideas of things we want to talk about during the game and what we talk about in our stand-up, which is kind of our theme for what we hope to see or what we're predicting might happen in that game. But obviously, if it doesn't happen, we're not wrong. We talk about why it didn't happen. Last night, the first game against the Brewers is a perfect example. How would Contreras and Flaherty work? That was our subject matter. It was great. Would Arenado keep hitting? He did. heck, the whole team started hitting again. So it did. That's the kind of game that sort of does the impossible. It makes us look really, really smart. But that's kind of what we do. The game ends, come back and try to unwind and watch the highlights and look at the other games on the West Coast, and then go to bed and do it again. And I think that's really the lesson, I would say, is we try to be boring pros. Routine is really important to all of us. We have our own routines. We do it the same way every single day, because to veer from that routine is really uncomfortable and leads to problems, because we're truly type A driven. Keep it simple, stupid, boring pros, and that's I think what makes the guys that sit in these chairs really successful, at least in my opinion.
Well, I think, again, not to keep tying it back to business, but I talk about consistently boring, and then I talk about preparation, and that's what I'm hearing from you, right? Be consistently boring and be prepared, right? I got this much stuff.
Right, yeah, and by boring, I don't mean you're just drone on, Paul.
No.
We're excited. We're fans. When they play bad, I think you've heard that in my voice in some of these games. There goes another home run. Like, crap, here we go again. Or if a guy has a big night, we get excited. But it's knowing what to say and when to say it, and what, more importantly on TV, what not to say. We're all guilty of talking way too much. I know I am. But it's just the nature of the excitement of the job and loving to talk about our sport. But you're right. You're boring in your preparation. Hopefully you're not boring in your presentation. And at least you walk in prepared for any eventuality, because cameras break, audio goes out, guys get hurt, hailstorms hit, all kinds of crazy stuff. You just have to expect the unexpected and be prepared for that. Yeah. And hold on for the roller coaster ride and see where it takes you.
How good is Brad Thompson?
Awesome. Great. Funny. Wonderfully witty. Quick. Dry wit. Eminently prepared. I'm really happy for him. He's so excited about this opportunity to do more games. And Jim have been awesome partners. They're both great friends. I'm really lucky that wherever I've worked, I've had phenomenal teammates. And I think the thing that characterized my experience in Atlanta was these aren't my coworkers. These are my family. We actually spend more time with the men and women in our broadcast booth than we do our children or our spouses. And if you don't have that good relationship, it makes for a long, long year. And not just on the TV side. Ricky Horton, John Rooney, Mike Claiborne, Jim Jackson on the radio side have been incredibly welcoming. And we do stuff together on the road. We go to dinner. We go for walks. I mean, it really has been seamless from that standpoint. And so having that kind of a support system for all of us, not just them for me, but me to them, I think has been one of the best parts of the first 6 weeks of the season.
Yeah. Yeah, again, business-wise, right? The team matters. Who you surround yourself with matters. And if you're surrounded by some bums, you're going to be a bum, right? But you're around great guys.
Try to soar with the Eagles, right?
Right, exactly.
I think part of my job is I try to make people better, and I hope they make me better too. We all have accountability partners in our jobs, and if I screw something up, I'm not too proud to say, "Hey, I messed that up." I did that last night. I got Jack Flaherty's season high strikeout thing wrong. I said 8 was the season high. It would have been 8 walks. I said, "Excuse me, that's wrong. There's his 9. That's his career high." Pride's a dangerous thing, right? And it's okay to make mistakes. It's when you don't correct them, as I found out personally and professionally, that leads to most of the problems. So if you make a mistake, admit it, move on. People will, I think, appreciate the fact that you at least were prepared enough to know that and man enough to admit it.
So you've had the front row for amazing sports moments in your career. So can you talk through some of those favorite ones that stick out the most for you?
Well, the one that jumps out first, I'm sorry, Cardinals fans, is Caray Wood's 20 strikeout game. That was like 6 weeks into my major league career with the Cubs.
Wow.
Trying to call Harry Caray in his booth with his partner, his crew, his city, all that stuff, and he strikes out 20 Astros. That was certainly his coming out party as a Cubs player. He is an announcer in a big market. People were like, "Wow, this guy has a pretty good idea of what he's doing," and that was a big moment, for me. For people who follow baseball and like Bill James' game score. He has postulated that is the most dominant pitching performance in the history of Major League Baseball, and for me, it was like my 30th game with the Cubs. So that was really cool. My first NBA game, obviously at 24 years old, I was the youngest guy in the league, and we were doing an exhibition game against the Detroit Pistons, the Bad Boys, and Lambeer and Dumars and Rodman, all those guys. To do that at 24 and begin my my climb up the ladder was great. Doing a game with my dad and grandfather in Wrigley Field in Chicago 32 years ago, almost to the day, something that I'll never forget, may not happen again. And now watching my boys grow and flourish and start their way in this crazy business is really, really exciting. And they're super talented. It's only going to be a matter of time, I think, before someone gives them a chance at their young age like they gave me. And, when that happens for them and for my 14-year-old, he wants to do it too. So we're tougher to kill than COVID, man. You can't get rid of it everywhere. But I'm really, really proud of all of those things. And as I said, my marriage to my wife and her family and the support system I've been received, I'm really a humble and blessed person.
I love it. Last couple questions here, as I know you got to get rolling to the stadium. So when you see these players like an Arenado or Caray Wood in the '98 season, got 20 strikeouts. These players are at this next level, right? These MVP type players. Do you notice something different in them when because you get to rub elbows with them all day, every day? Like what do you see that's different from people like that than maybe just your normal guy on the team?
Drive, consistency, expectation of excellence. They hold themselves to an incredibly high standard. They're accountable. The guys that are really, really good in the game are the ones who, if they have a good day, they deflect the praise to others. If they have a bad day or the team loses, they find a way to say, well, if I had been better, we would have been better. That's the essence of leadership, I think, for me. We're the face on TV of hundreds of people who, if they don't do their job well, we can't possibly look good. And as I said before, sometimes things happen that are out of your control. It's our job to cover for that and hope that the audience doesn't notice it. The same with superstar players. They're the guys that are paid for a reason. They're the guys that are the faces of their club, but they're also the guys that are the first to win. Arenado's a perfect example of that for the Cardinals. The first 6 weeks of the season, he said, I'm not playing well. And until I do, this is going to be a struggle for all of us. And I know I'm not right, but I'm going to get there. And fortunately for us who follow baseball, there's a thing called a bubblegum card. And on the back, there are a whole bunch of statistics that give you hope that these guys are going to be within 5-10% of those numbers by the end of the year. That's why they're stars. They're consistent, they're accountable, they deflect praise, they accept the criticism, and they hold themselves to a very high standard and try to surpass it each and every day. They get here and they try to beat it and beat it again and beat it again the next day. That's what makes them great.
That's phenomenal. So final question here for you is if you could go back and tell the 40-year-old Chip Caray, give that guy some advice, what advice would you have for you?
Wow. What advice would I have? I would say enjoy the ride more. I think like all of us in this business, we're in such a hurry to get to where we want to go that we don't enjoy the highs and lows that naturally take place. It's the old saying, process over outcome. That comes with maturity, and that's still a struggle for me. It's a struggle for my sons because they want to get to the major leagues, and I tell them all the time, hey, enjoy the stupid stuff that happens in AA because those will be the funny things you talk about when you're
right.
Because it's the shared experience, right? But the 40-year-old, I think I would enjoy seeing my kids be a little more. I would enjoy, being around my family more. I wouldn't obsess and worry about things as much. Some of that was the environment from which I came that made that difficult to do. But, the old saying, stop and smell the roses, is really, really one that's worth repeating because at the end of the day, I'd rather be remembered as a good husband and father and a great friend than it would be for a guy that said ball two as well as anybody else in the business. That's the stuff that really matters. And I've learned that. My grandfather never did. My dad did, certainly, but wasn't in a position to do it. And I hope that I can do a better job than the two of them and passing that along to the rest of my family. And as I said, the patience of Job that my wife has, and Miss Susan, is the reason why I think as I've gotten older, I've learned to appreciate those things a whole lot more than just a baseball game.
It's awesome. Well, thanks so much for being with us, man. It's been awesome having you on the Circuit of Success. Hang with me here when I hit end, but it's been great having you, Chip.
My pleasure. Anytime. We'll see you soon.